I am Dorothy Washington. I am 67 years old, and if life has taught me one brutal lesson, it is that loyalty is the most expensive currency in the world, and most people are counterfeiting it. I spent 40 years building a logistics empire worth $500 million, bleeding into the concrete of every warehouse foundation, missing birthdays, skipping vacations, and trading my sleep for market share. I gave my family everything: the mansions, the Ivy League degrees, the black cards with no limits. In return, exactly 7 days after I buried my husband, they handed me a retirement package that was essentially an eviction notice. They looked at me across the mahogany table and saw a grieving widow, a relic, a woman too broken to fight back. They thought they were putting a sick dog out of its misery, but they made a fatal miscalculation. They didn't know that the relic sitting in front of them wasn't just the CEO. I was the architect of the entire game they were trying to play. They didn't know I held the only key to the vault that actually mattered. They thought they had won the war before the first shot was fired. By tomorrow morning, they will be destitute. Their reputations will be ash, and I will be the one standing over the wreckage of their arrogance. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. The air in the boardroom was recycled and stale, chilled to a temperature that kept everyone alert and uncomfortable. It was a climate I had designed myself decades ago to keep meetings short, but today, the cold felt personal. I sat at the head of the table, the leather of my chair creaking slightly as I shifted my weight. My husband, Raymond, had been in the ground for exactly 1 week. The dirt on his grave hadn't even settled yet, and the vultures were already circling the carcass of my life. To my right sat Tanisha, my daughter. She was 40 years old, but in that moment, she looked like a teenager waiting for a scolding. She was fidgeting with her bracelet, avoiding my eyes, her gaze fixed on the polished grain of the table. She was the Chief Operating Officer of Washington Distribution Group, a title I had given her not because she earned it, but because Raymond wanted to keep the family close. Across from her sat her husband, Marcus. If Tanisha was the nervous prey, Marcus was the apex predator. He was impeccable. His dark suit was tailored to perfection, his bald head gleaming under the recessed lights. He didn't fidget. He didn't look away. He stared right at me with eyes that were as flat and cold as a frozen lake. "Let's be realistic, Dorothy," Marcus said, his voice smooth, practiced. It was the voice of someone who had rehearsed this conversation in the mirror 100 times. "The market doesn't pause for mourning." We all loved Raymond. He was the soul of this company, but without him, stability is the priority. I didn't blink. I kept my hands folded on the table, my face a mask of stone. "Stability," I repeated. The word tasted like ash. "Is that what we're calling it?" "We're calling it leadership," Marcus corrected, a shark-like smile touching the corners of his lips. "Investors are nervous. They see a CEO who has been absent, distracted. You missed the Q3 earnings call. You haven't signed the fleet expansion orders for the Midwest hub. People are whispering, Dorothy. They're saying you've lost your edge. They're saying the grief has made you soft." "I was holding my husband's hand while he died," I said, my voice low and gravelly. "I didn't think the fleet expansion was the priority at that specific moment." Tanisha flinched. She actually looked pained, a flicker of guilt crossing her weak features. "Mama, we want to protect the legacy." "Daddy would have wanted stop." I cut her off, the single syllable cracking like a whip in the silent room. "Do not finish that sentence, Tanisha. You don't get to speak for him." Marcus placed a hand on Tanisha's forearm, silencing her. It was a gesture of dominance, not comfort. He turned his gaze back to me, his eyes narrowing. "The board meets in 5 days, Dorothy. We have the votes. We have the support. We're offering you a graceful exit. Chairwoman Emeritus, a generous stipend. You can travel. You can finally rest. You're sick. You're a relic in a digital world. Step down. Let Tanisha take the helm and preserve your dignity." He slid a thick document across the table. It was bound in heavy linen paper, the separation agreement. "And if I refuse?" I asked, ignoring the document. Marcus's smile widened, revealing perfect white veneer. "Then we bring the vote to the floor. We air the dirty laundry, the missed meetings, the erratic behavior during Raymond's illness, the stalled contracts. We will paint a picture of a senile old woman driving the company off a cliff. We will humiliate you, Dorothy, and we will win." I looked at him. I looked at the ambition radiating off him like heat waves from asphalt. He wanted this so badly he could taste it. He saw Washington Distribution Group not as a business that moved food and medicine to millions of people, but as a personal ATM to fund his lifestyle, and he saw me as the only obstacle standing in his way. I looked at Tanisha. And you? I asked softly. Is this what you want? To put your mother out to pasture? Tanisha swallowed hard. It's business, Mama. It's time for a new generation. Business? I echoed. I stood up slowly. I could feel the stiffness in my joints, the weight of the last few months pressing down on my shoulders, but I didn't let them see it. I straightened my spine, buttoned my blazer, and looked down at them. I'll review the proposal, I said. Marcus's eyes flashed with triumph. He thought I had folded. He thought the old lioness had no teeth left. Take 24 hours, he said magnanimously. Don't take too long, Dorothy. The future is waiting. I turned and walked out of the boardroom without looking back. The heavy oak doors clicked shut behind me, sealing them in their bubble of premature victory. They were celebrating. I was already loading the artillery. I walked through the corridors of the building I had built from the ground up. I passed the framed photographs on the walls, black and white images of my first truck, a battered Ford that smelled of diesel and sweat. I passed the photos of the groundbreakings, the ribbon cuttings, the massive distribution centers that now dotted the map from Seattle to Miami. Employees nodded as I passed, but I could see the looks in their eyes: pity, uncertainty. The whispers Marcus mentioned weren't imaginary. He had planted them, watered them, and let them bloom. They looked at me and saw a ghost. I entered my office, a corner suite with a panoramic view of the Detroit skyline. I didn't sit at my desk. I didn't pour a drink. I went straight to the window and looked out at the gray city below. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. A text from Keisha, my personal attorney, and the only woman in this building I trusted with my life. Message: they've locked out your admin access to the financial server. It just happened. I stared at the screen. Marcus wasn't waiting for my answer. He was already tightening the noose, cutting off my information flow, blinding me before the kill. He was thorough. I had to give him that dot. I typed a reply: .me, meet me at the drop. 1 hour. Bring the extraction kit. I deleted the message immediately. I couldn't trust the company network. I couldn't trust the Wi-Fi. I couldn't trust the walls that Raymond had warned me about this. 6 months ago, sitting on the patio, wrapped in a blanket, he had looked at me with those sharp, knowing eyes. He's hungry, Dorothy, he had said, his voice rasping from the treatment. Marcus, he looks at this company and he doesn't see the work. He sees the power. And Tanisha, she's too weak to stop him. I had dismissed it then. I told him he was being paranoid, that the chemo was making him cynical. I had defended them. God, I had defended them. The regret hit me like a physical blow to the gut, sharp and nauseating. I had been blind. I had been a fool, but I wouldn't be a victim. I grabbed my coat. I didn't take my briefcase. I didn't take my laptop. I walked out of the office with nothing but the clothes on my back and the rage burning in my chest. The drop was what Keisha and I called a small, grease-stained diner on the east side near the old freight yards where I used to load trucks myself. It was the kind of place where the coffee tasted like battery acid and the waitress had been smoking since the Nixon administration. It was perfect. No corporate spies, no electronic bugs, just truckers and silence. Keisha was already there, sitting in a corner booth with her back to the wall. She was a sharp contrast to the peeling vinyl seats, a black woman, in her late 50s. Dressed in a suit that cost more than the building we were sitting in. She had a laptop open, but it was disconnected from the internet. I slid into the booth opposite her. They made the move, I said without preamble. Keisha nodded, not looking up from the screen. I assumed as much when the IT department flagged a priority credential revocation for your account ID. Marcus and Tanisha, I said. She sat there and let him hold the knife. Keisha stopped typing. She looked at me, her dark eyes filled with a deep, sorrowful understanding. She had known Raymond almost as long as I had. She knew what this meant. I'm sorry, Dorothy, she said softly. Save the sympathy, I snapped. Though I took the coffee she pushed toward me. I need to know what they're hiding. You don't stage a coup this aggressive just because you're ambitious. You do it because you're covering your tracks. Marcus is rushing this. He's frantic. Why? Panic, Keisha said. Panic induces speed. Speed induces errors. Exactly. He wants me out before the quarterly audit next month. He wants total control so he can bury something. I leaned forward, lowering my voice. I want a forensic audit. Keisha, deep dive. I want you to tear apart the financials for the last 24 months. Every vendor, every contract, every expense report under $10,000. Under $10,000, Keisha raised an eyebrow. It's the limit for Tanisha's discretionary approval, I said. If they're stealing, they're doing it in bite-sized chunks so it doesn't trigger the board's radar. Start with consulting firms, marketing agencies, anything intangible. Keisha nodded, making a note on a yellow legal pad. I can do that, but if they've locked you out, getting the raw data will be difficult. I have a back door, I said, but we have to be fast. And Keisha, there's something else. What? Raymond, I said. The name hung in the air between us. Before he died, he was acting strange. He was making calls. He was moving boxes from the attic. He told me he was organizing old photos, but he was up at all hours. I think he knew something. I think he was investigating them. Keisha frowned. He never mentioned anything to me. He wouldn't, I said. He would have wanted to protect me. He knew I was falling apart watching him die. He wouldn't have burdened me with a corporate war. I took a sip of the bitter coffee. Find the money, Keisha. Find out why they're so desperate to get rid of me. And do it before the board meeting on Friday. And if I find what we think we'll find, Keisha asked, then we don't just fire them, I said, my voice cold. We destroy them. 2 days later, I was pacing the floor of Keisha's private office. The sun had gone down hours ago, turning the windows into black mirrors reflecting my own exhausted face. Got it, Keisha said. I stopped pacing and moved to her desk. Show me, Keisha spun her monitor around. A spreadsheet was open, a complex web of red lines and numbers. It took some digging, Keisha said, tapping the screen. They were clever, but not clever enough. They used a technique called smurfing, breaking large transactions into small, undetectable amounts, but the destination is always the same. She pointed to a recurring vendor name, M&T Consulting Solutions. M&T, I read aloud, Marcus and Tanisha. Jesus, they didn't even try to be creative. Registered in Delaware as a limited liability corporation, Keisha explained. Stated purpose, logistical efficiency consulting. They've been billing Washington Distribution Group for 18 months. Market analysis, workflow optimization, synergy reports, vaporware. No reports were ever filed. No work was ever done. How much? I asked, bracing myself. Total billed to date, $812,450. Over $800,000, while I was working 80-hour days to keep the stock price up during a recession. While Raymond was going through rounds of radiation that burned his skin, they were siphoning nearly $1 million out of the company to fight. Where did the money go? I demanded. Keisha clicked a few keys. A new window popped up. Bank statements for M&T Consulting Solutions. Direct wire transfers, Keisha said. 2 main outflows. 1. A down payment on a property in Martha's Vineyard, Massachusetts. A beachfront estate, 6 bedrooms, private dock. Title is in Marcus's mother's name. And the rest, a lump sum payment to a dealership in Detroit. A 2024 Mercedes MG GT custom order, matte black. I felt a surge of bile in my throat. A beach house, a sports car. They weren't stealing to pay off debts or save a sick child. They were stealing 4 toys. They were looting my life's work to play dress up. Print it, I said. Print everything. Wait, Keisha said, her voice suddenly tense. Dorothy, look at this. She was staring at the screen, her brow furrowed. She was looking at the authorization logs for the M&T payments. What is it? The approval signatures, Keisha said slowly. They aren't, Tanisha. I froze. What do you mean? You said it was her discretionary limit. It is, Keisha said, but the digital signature on the invoices, it's yours. The room went silent. The hum of the computer server in the corner seemed to roar in my ears. Mine. I stepped closer, squinting at the screen. That's impossible. I never signed these. I never even saw these invoices. I know that, Keisha said, her fingers flying across the keyboard now. But the system thinks you did. Look at the metadata. The user ID is DW. The authentication key matches your biometric token. I stared at the screen, a cold dread washing over the anger. They framed me. It's worse than a frame-up, Keisha said, her face pale. If we take this to the board, if we show them the theft, the evidence points directly to you. Marcus can claim he and Tanisha knew nothing about M&T Consulting Solutions. He can claim you set up the shell company to embezzle funds for your retirement. He can claim that's why they wanted you to step down quietly to protect you from prison. I staggered back, hitting the wall. It was evil, pure, and simple. Marcus hadn't just stolen the money. He had used the theft to build a trapdoor under my feet. If I fought him, he would reveal the embezzlement and send me to federal prison. If I resigned, he would keep the money and the company. He has me in checkmate, I whispered. Not yet, Keisha said, her eyes hard. Digital signatures can be spoofed, but we need to prove it. We need to find the origin of the approval command. If we can prove the command didn't come from your laptop but from somewhere else, we can turn it back on them. How? We need the IP logs, Keisha said. We need to see exactly where the signal originated. But those logs are on the internal security server at the office, the one you're locked out of. I can't get in, I said. My badge is deactivated. We don't need to get in physically, Keisha said. We need a hacker. We didn't go to a criminal. We went to a specialist Keisha knew, a cybersecurity consultant named Jamal, who worked out of a basement in Corktown that smelled of ozone and stale pizza. Jamal didn't ask questions. He just took the hard drive image Keisha had managed to scrape before the lockout and started working. 3 hours passed. I paced the small room like a caged animal. Every minute that ticked by was a minute closer to the board meeting. Got it, Jamal mumbled, his mouth full of pretzels. Show me, I demanded. Okay, so here's the transaction from last month, Jamal said, pointing to a line of code. User D. Washington CEO approves payment. But look at the packet header. The latency is wrong. In English, Jamal, I snapped. The signal, Jamal said. It didn't come from the CEO's laptop. It came from a device utilizing a VPN to mimic the CEO's IP address, but the VPN dropped 4.4 seconds during the handshake, and during that drop, the real MAC address of the device was exposed. Jamal grinned. It's an iPhone 15 Pro. Device name, King M. Marcus. I exhaled. He used his own phone, Keisha said, shaking her head in disbelief. Arrogance. He thought no one would ever look this deep. So we have him, I said. Almost, Jamal said. This is just a trace on a copied hard drive. It's circumstantial. To stand up in court or a hostile board meeting, you need the raw server logs, the immutable chain of custody. You need the file system log off directly from the mainframe. Where is it? I asked. On the secure server in the IT wing, Jamal said. You have to download it directly, and you have to do it before he realizes we're looking for it and purges the system. We have the proof, I said to Keisha, but we need the weapon. There's one more thing, Keisha said. Before we go back to the office, you need to see Miss Loretta, the nurse. I asked. Why? Because Keisha said, closing her laptop, while you were looking for the money, I was looking into Raymond's phone records the night before he died. He called Miss Loretta 3 times, and he called the bank. Miss Loretta lived in a small brick bungalow in Highland Park. Her garden was immaculate, filled with the roses Raymond had taught her how to prune. When she opened the door and saw me, her face crumpled. Mrs. Washington, she whispered, I was waiting for you. You were. He told me you would come, Miss Loretta said. He said, when the wolves come for her, she will come to you. She led me into her kitchen. It was warm and smelled of cinnamon. She went to a ceramic jar on the counter and pulled out a small velvet pouch. Raymond was not just sick, Mrs. Washington, Miss Loretta said, her hands trembling, as she held the pouch. He was awake. In those last weeks, when you thought he was sleeping, he was watching. He saw Mr. Marcus looking at the financial papers. He heard Tanisha talking on the phone about timelines and liquidations. Why didn't he tell me? I asked, my voice cracking. He tried, Miss Loretta said, but you were so sad. He didn't want your last memories of him to be about war. He wanted to solve it himself. So he did. Miss Loretta opened the pouch. Inside was a single heavy iron key. It looked old, tarnished. What is this? I asked. Taking it, the metal was cold in my palm. It is for a safety deposit box, Miss Loretta said. Box 404 at the Midwest Federal Trust. He opened it 40 years ago. He said, the truth is inside. He said, this is your shield. I stared at the key. Raymond had been playing a game of 4D chess while dying of cancer. He had prepared a failsafe. Thank you, Miss Loretta, I said. Go, she said, wiping her eyes. Finish it for him. The Midwest Federal Trust was a fortress of limestone and marble downtown. The air inside was hushed, reverent. I showed my ID and the key. The bank manager, a man who looked like he had been embalmed in the 1950s, nodded solemnly. Mr. Washington left strict instructions. He said, access was to be granted only to you, and only after his death. He led me into the vault. The door was a massive circle of steel that hissed as it swung open. The walls were lined with thousands of metal drawers. Box 404. I inserted the iron key. The manager inserted his master key. Click. I pulled the long metal drawer out. It was heavy. I carried it to a private viewing room and set it on the table. My hands were shaking. What had Raymond hidden for 4 decades? I opened the lid. There was no money inside, no gold, just a stack of yellow documents and a small leather-bound diary. I picked up the first document. It was a birth certificate dated August 14, 1984. Name: Tanisha Marie Washington. Mother: Linda Hayes. Father: Raymond Washington. The world stopped spinning. The air left the room. Linda Hayes, a waitress I had known for a brief, stupid month during a separation from Raymond early in our marriage. A mistake. A drunken, reckless mistake. Raymond had paid her off. She had disappeared. I thought she had terminated the pregnancy. I looked at the next document, adoption papers dated 6 months later, signed by Dorothy Washington. I grabbed the diary. I flipped to the entry date, August 20th, 1984. I found her today. The baby. She has Dorothy's eyes. The mother doesn't want her. She wants cash. Dorothy thinks the problem is gone, but there is a child, a daughter. If I leave her there, she will have a terrible life. If I tell Dorothy, the guilt will destroy her. She will never forgive herself. So I will do the only thing I can. I will bring her home. I will tell Dorothy I adopted a child from the agency. I will raise my wife's daughter as my own, and I will never let her know the sin that created her. I will turn this betrayal into a family. I sank into the chair, tears streaming down my face. I gasped for air, sobbing. He knew. He had always known. For 40 years, he had raised the product of my infidelity. He had loved her, nursed her, championed her. He had protected me from my own shame. And Tanisha was my biological daughter, but not his. I turned the page. A bookmark fell out. A folded legal document. The last will and testament of Raymond Washington, amended. I scanned the legal jargon until I hit the paragraph highlighted in yellow marker. Section 14. The Bloodline Protection Clause. In the event of my death, my 51% controlling interest in Washington Distribution Group shall pass exclusively to a biological heir of my body. No adopted lineage, regardless of legal standing, shall inherit the controlling share. This trust is absolute. I stared at the words. Raymond knew. He knew Marcus was a predator. He knew Tanisha was weak. So he had built a wall. Tanisha, as an adopted daughter legally, was excluded from the controlling stake if this clause was invoked. But if Tanisha couldn't inherit, and I was only holding 49%, who got the 51%? I flipped to the last page of the diary. I have a son I gave up when I was 17, before I met Dorothy. I found him last year. He is a surgeon in Atlanta. His name is Michael Raymond. He is good. He is strong. If Dorothy reads this, it means the wolves are at the door. Find Michael. He is the heir. He is the future. My God, the scope of it was staggering. Raymond had a secret son. Tanisha was my secret daughter, and the company belonged to a stranger in Atlanta. I closed the box. The tears dried on my face, leaving behind a tight, hard mask of resolve. I had the weapon. I had the shield. Now I just needed to survive the next 12 hours. I grabbed my phone to call Keisha. I have it, I said. I have everything. Dorothy. Keisha's voice was panicked. Get to the office now. Why? Jamal is monitoring the network. The server usage just spiked to 100%. Someone initiated a system maintenance protocol. What does that mean? It means Marcus is wiping the drives. Keisha yelled. He's deleting the server logs. If he finishes, the proof of the IP spoof is gone. You'll be framed forever. I ran. I burst out of the bank and flagged a taxi, screaming at the driver to get me to Washington Tower. When I arrived, the lobby was empty. I used an old maintenance key, one they had forgotten to deactivate, to get into the stairwell. I ran up 6 flights to the server room floor. I burst through the doors. The air was humming with the sound of cooling fans spinning at maximum velocity. I ran to the main console. The screen was a wall of red text. Deleting Sector 4. Complete. Deleting Sector 5. Complete. Purging logs. No. I slammed my fingers onto the keyboard, trying to cancel the command. Access denied. Admin privileges required. I watched, helpless, as the progress bar hit 100%. Deletion complete. System rebooting. The screen went black. The logs were gone. The proof that Marcus had used his phone to frame me was gone. I stood there in the blinking blue light of the server room, panting, sweat dripping down my back. They had won. Without those logs, I was just an old woman with a crazy story about a diary and a secret son. They would bury me. My phone rang. It was Keisha. Did you stop it? No, I rasped. It's gone. Everything. He wiped it. There was a long silence on the line. Then we're dead, Keisha said. Wait, I said. My eyes scanned the room, the sleek modern server racks, the cloud uplink, and then my memory flashed back to 1999, the Y2K scare. Keisha, I said, my voice rising, the system, the core architecture, it was built on the old legacy mainframe from the 90s. So, I said, the old system had a hardwired redundancy, a tape backup. Every night at midnight, it writes a physical magnetic tape of the day's transaction logs. It's a fail-safe against EMPs or total cloud failure. Does it still work? I never turned it off, I said, but the tape drives aren't here. They're in the bunker. The bunker. The Westside Depot, I said. The old storage facility. That's where the physical archives are. I checked my watch. It was 11 p.m. The board meeting was at 8 a.m. The tape from yesterday, I calculated, it would have recorded the spoofed signal before the wipe. It's sitting on a reel in a warehouse 10 miles from here. Marcus knows about the depot, Keisha warned. He tried to sell it last month. Then I have to get there before he remembers it exists, I said. Meet me there. Bring the playback equipment. My company car was gone, repossessed by Tanisha that morning. I took a taxi to my townhouse. In the garage, under a dusty tarp, sat the one thing they hadn't taken because they didn't know it ran. My 1968 Ford Mustang, the car I had restored with my own hands. I turned the key. The V8 engine roared to life, a guttural angry sound that matched the beating of my heart. I tore out of the garage, tires screeching. I hit the expressway, weaving through the late-night traffic. I wasn't a CEO anymore. I was a truck driver. I knew these roads better than the blood in my veins. I pushed the Mustang to 80-90 miles an hour. The city blurred past. I was racing not just for the money, but for Raymond, for the truth, for the daughter who didn't know who she was. The Westside Depot was a crumbling brick monolith from the industrial age. It was surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with razor wire. I skidded to a halt at the gate. It was locked. And there was a car there, a black SUV. Marcus. He had remembered. I slammed the Mustang into gear and drove through the gate. The chain link snapped with a screech of tearing metal. I drove straight up to the loading dock. Two men, in security uniforms, private contractors, not my employees, stepped out of the SUV. They had hands on their holsters. Private property, one yelled. Get out of the vehicle. I stepped out. I held the tire iron I had grabbed from the trunk. I must have looked like a maniac, a 67-year-old woman in a suit, holding a metal bar, eyes wild. I am Dorothy Washington, I roared. I own this property. Step aside. We have orders from the coup to secure the site, the guard said, unholstering a taser. No access. Tanisha is a child, I shouted, stepping forward. I built this move. The guard raised the taser. Suddenly, headlights flooded the yard. Keisha's Lexus screeched in, flanked by another Cara police cruiser. Keisha stepped out, waving a paper. Officer, these men are trespassing on private property. Here is the deed. The guards hesitated. They looked at the cop, then at me. They were hired muscle, not loyalists. They lowered their weapons. We're just doing our job, the guard muttered. Your job is done, I spat. I ran past them into the warehouse. I sprinted to the archive cage in the back. I smashed the padlock with the tire iron. Inside, the air smelled of dust and magnetic tape. Banks of old reel-to-reel machines hummed in the dark. I scanned the labels. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. There it was. The reel labeled Daily Log Archive, Current. I grabbed it. It was heavy. It felt like victory. 8 a.m., the boardroom. The mood was few. The board members, 6 men and women, who had known me for years, sat in uncomfortable silence. Marcus and Tanisha were at the head of the table. Marcus looked radiant. He had won. The servers were wiped. I had no evidence. Shall we begin? Marcus said, opening a folder. We are here to discuss the immediate transition of leadership due to incapacity. He looked at the empty chair where I usually sat. Dorothy has declined to attend, he said, with fake sadness. I think her absence speaks volumes about her mental state. Does it? I asked. I walked into the room. I was wearing the same suit from yesterday. I hadn't slept. I looked rough, dangerous. Marcus froze. Security, he hissed. Why was she let in? Because my name is on the building, Marcus, I said, walking to the head of the table. Keisha followed me in, carrying a heavy, archaic-looking reel-to-reel player and a laptop. This is highly irregular, a board member muttered. Sit down, George, I said. You're going to want to see this. This is a waste of time. Marcus stood up. We have a vote scheduled. Dorothy is trying to stall because she embezzled nearly $1 million. The room gasped. He had played his card. He set up a shell company. Marcus shouted, pointing at me. M&T Consulting Solutions. She stole from the company to fund her retirement. We have the digital signatures. Show them. Marcus projected the slide. The invoices. My digital signature. There. Proof. Now, I said to Keisha, play the tape. Keisha connected the old machine to the room's AV system. The screen flickered, then showed raw code scrolling in green text. What is this? Tanisha asked, her voice trembling. This is the backup tape from the legacy server, I said. The one you forgot to wipe. Marcus, it records the truth, not the lies you planted. Keisha paused the scroll. Here, Keisha pointed. Timestamp, 14:02 hours. Command, approve invoice. Origin, IP spoofed. Real MAC address, Apple device, King M. The silence was absolute. Every eye turned to Marcus. King M. I said, your phone, Marcus. That's manipulated, he stammered, his face draining of color. And here Keisha continued, the outgoing wire transfers to the Martha's Vineyard Title Company for a property in the name of Evelyn Carter. She clicked again, and to the Mercedes dealership. I turned to the board. He stole the money. He used his own device, and then he spoofed my signature to frame me, and last night, he wiped the main servers to hide it, but he forgot the tapes. Tanisha was staring at the screen. Martha's Vineyard, she whispered. You bought the house? You told me the deal fell through. Shut up, Tanisha, Marcus hissed. She played you, daughter, I said, looking at her with pity. He played all of us. This is a lie, Marcus screamed. She's senile, she's crazy. Motion to dismiss Marcus Carter, I said, looking at the board, for gross misconduct, embezzlement, and corporate espionage. Seconded, George said immediately, his face purple with rage. All in favor. Every hand went up. Motion passes, I said. You're fired. Marcus, get out. Security. My security stepped forward. You can't do this, Marcus shrieked as they grabbed his arms. I own half this stock. I'm the husband of the heir. You can't touch me. He was dragged out, kicking and screaming, his dignity shedding like dead skin. Tanisha sat there, weeping. Mama, I didn't know. I swear, you should have known, I said quietly. You're the coup. Ignorance isn't a defense, it's a resignation. Tanisha put her head in her hands. We were done. The cancer was cut out, but the surgery wasn't over. A week later, the dust had settled. The criminal charges were filed. Marcus was out on bail, facing 10 years for fraud, but he wasn't done. He requested a meeting, a settlement conference. He walked into Keisha's office with Tanisha trailing behind him. He looked haggard, but his eyes were still defiant. Okay, Dorothy, he said, sitting down. You won the battle, but you haven't won the war. We're filing for divorce, of course, but Tanisha still owns her shares, and as her husband, I'm entitled to half of her assets. That includes her future inheritance, the 51%. He leaned forward. So here's the deal. You drop the criminal charges, or we tie this company up in probate court for the next 20 years. We will freeze the assets. We will bleed you dry. Tanisha looked at me, pleading. Mama, just let us go, please. I looked at them. They still thought they had leverage. There is no inheritance, Tanisha, I said softly. What? Marcus snapped. She's your daughter, he said. She's Raymond's daughter. She gets the controlling stake. It's in the bylaws, Keisha, I said. Read the will. Keisha opened the blue folder. Article 14, she read. The Bloodline clause. The controlling interest passes only to a biological heir of Raymond Washington. Marcus laughed, a brittle, cracking sound. So Tanisha is his daughter. What is this? A biology lesson. I've seen the birth certificate. You've seen the adoption papers. I corrected. Bacchus stopped laughing. What? I didn't know either, I said, until I opened the box. I slid the old, yellowed birth certificate across the table. Mother, Linda Hayes. Tanisha stared at it. She picked it up, her hands trembling so hard the paper rattled against the glass table. Mama, she whispered. Mama isn't. He adopted you. Tanisha, I said. He loved you more than life itself, but he knew you were weak. And he knew, I looked at Marcus, he knew you would try to take the company. So he wrote the clause. This is fake, Marcus hissed. You forged this. We anticipated you would say that, Keisha said, which is why we executed the DNA test Raymond ordered before he died. He submitted his sample, and he pulled a sample from Tanisha's medical file. Keisha placed the lab report on the table. Probability of paternity, 0.00%. Tanisha is not a biological heir, Keisha said. Therefore, under the terms of the trust, she inherits nothing. No stock, no voting rights, nothing. Marcus stared at the paper. The math was crashing down on him. 0 times 51% was 0. Then who? He whispered. If not her, who gets it? You can't inherit it either. You're the spouse, not the bloodline. No, I said. I don't get it. The door to the conference room opened. A man walked in. He was tall, with dark skin and sharp, intelligent eyes. He wore a simple gray coat and carried himself with a quiet dignity that filled the room. Tanisha looked up. She gasped. He looked exactly like Raymond did at 40. Marcus, Tanisha, I said, standing up. I'd like you to meet Dr. Michael Raymond. Michael stepped forward. He didn't smile. He looked at Marcus with clinical detachment. Who is he? Marcus demanded, his voice rising to a shriek. He is the chief of cardiology at Emory University Hospital, Keisha said, and he is Raymond Washington's biological son, born in 1968, given up for adoption, reunited last year. He is the heir, I said. He owns the 51%. Marcus looked at Michael. He looked at the face that was undeniably Raymond's. The fight went out of him. It was like cutting the strings of a marionette. He slumped in his chair. No, he moaned. No, no, no. He had lost the money. He had lost the company. He had lost the leverage. Tanisha was staring at me. Mama, does that mean you're my daughter, Tanisha, I said, my voice breaking. I made a mistake 40 years ago. I cheated. You were the result. Raymond, he saved us both. He took you in to hide my sin. He loved you to protect me. Tanisha started to sob, ugly, racking sobs. She realized, finally, that the man she had betrayed, the father she had helped rob, was the only reason she had a life at all, and she had spat on his grave. Get out, Michael said. His voice was calm, but it had steel in it. Get out of my company. Marcus stood up, swaying. He grabbed his briefcase. He didn't look at Tanisha. He walked out the door into a future of courtrooms and bankruptcy. Tanisha lingered. She looked at me one last time. Mama, go, Tanisha, I said. Go find a job. Go earn something for the first time in your life. She turned and left. I stood on the loading dock of the main distribution center. The sun was setting, turning the sky a bruised purple. Trucks were rolling out, massive engines idling, the lifeblood of the company flowing again. Michael stood next to me. He was a genius, Michael said softly. My father. He was, I said. He played us all. He knew I would need a reason to fight. He knew I would need you. I'm not staying, Dorothy, Michael said. I have patients in Atlanta. I can't run a logistics company. I know, I said, but you'll be the chairman. You'll keep us honest. And you? He asked. I looked at the trucks. I looked at the empire I had built and almost lost. I'm going to run it, I said, for a little while longer, until I fix the damage, until it's worthy of his name again. I took the iron key out of my pocket. I held it up to the dying light. Thank you, Raymond, I whispered. The wind blew across the concrete, cold and fresh. It felt like forgiveness. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below of in just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.